Dramatic. I mean, he probably said to himself, do I want to be known as this tormented artist who killed himself, or as a junkie who screwed up and OD'd? What do I want to be known as?
And actually, it's interesting.
I don't think that there's any better. I don't think one is any better than the other, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Well, there's a quote from one of his friends that says, it was a really violent death. Like which is true. I mean, you shoot yourself in the face with a shotgun.
Which men traditionally have commit
but
violent
it was
suicide.
Interesting because in this quote, his friend was saying that wasn't Kurt. It's weird. There was no violence in Kurt, and it's weird that he chose to go out that way, which I think is a fair thing to say. But you pass out before you die from heroin. I mean, you just do, right? And so if you're trying to kill yourself, like by ODing, it's not certain that you're gonna die. You might just wake up and be living in hell, right? As opposed to if you stick a shotgun in your mouth and pull the trigger, you're probably gonna die.
Pretty definitive.
Especially if you've taken a bunch of heroin. I mean, it's certainty, It's that backup plan. But I hear you. If
I don't want to belabor this. It's just that I think if the guy wanted to get high before he did it, then why not just get so high that you go out and you don't have to lift a finger?
He could have been close.
Yeah.
Frankly. I mean, we don't know what his tolerance was, so he could have been really close to being that high.
No, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. But I do think that it's pretty definitive that he was not murdered. I think either way,
I can see the arguments on both sides. That's my problem with this case. That's why I didn't throw up the red flag of why are we doing this, is because I can see the arguments whether I am behind him or not.
And
but the only person who had a motive to murder him was Courtney Love, as far as I know.
Yeah.
What about Dave Grohl?
No.
Yeah, there you go. Courtney would not have sent him to rehab if she wanted him dead. What she would have done is she would have waited till he was off somewhere in the greenhouse, shooting up. She would have waited till he was kind of like just laying back and just all like, oh, and then she just would have stepped into the room with the hypodermic and shot a whole bunch more heroin into his arm and killed him that way. There's no need to use a shotgun.
She would have let him die in Rome.
Yeah, she would have let him die in Rome, for that matter. I mean, it simply makes no sense that Courtney was a murderer. Absolutely not.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. That implies rational thinking. Mm-hmm. I've known enough people who were so irrational that they're hot and cold.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the biggest thing about this case is that it was such a huge failure on the part of the Seattle police.
Well, yeah, they did.
They found the body, declared
instantly it was a suicide, and they claimed that because the beat cop that responded to the call said it kind of looked like a suicide. Yeah,
and that's like from the mouth of the guy who was the police chief at the time. He said, well, if the guy who responds says it looks like a suicide and the paramedics say then it's a suicide. They didn't get a talk screen back, they didn't get fingerprints back, they didn't process the
they did the least amount of work.
They did nothing. And that, I think, is probably why this is even a case right now.
They didn't know who he was.
Well,
they did know who he was.
I think that when they made their decision of what it was, they didn't know who he was to realize that they had to do their due diligence before they got their asses handed to them.
I guess the thing that annoys me about that statement is that it shouldn't matter who he was.
I don't disagree with that at all.
They found heroin paraphernalia 2 feet away from him. He obviously would have had track marks. So there was a shotgun, on him, and it looked like a suicide. But you at least wait for a talk screen. If you found drugs in the room, you gotta wait for a talk screen before you just can't declare it at the scene. And I think for me, that's the biggest frustration with this case. Whether, I don't think Courtney Love is a particularly good human being, whether I think, anything, the fact that the Seattle police did such a crap job on this is just frustrating as hell.
Well,
I think the other reason that this has gone on so long is that there's been so many things that were thrown into the mix that really, they're weird, and it's because I'm famous / Hollywood / big rocker guy weird, like the whole he had stomach issues thing.
Which we're not sure even if he did.
No, well, what's funny is that I remember when the news came out on MTV News because I was at some trip, a high school trip with a bunch of friends, and it came out, and I remember one buddy turning going, you know that he's totally had stomach issues for years, and like he could barely eat and move, and I'm sure that that's totally what did it. Like, those are the kind of things that you hear, and that's stuck with me for decades.
You know
Well,
what
he's,
stomach pains are a really good sign of?
A stomach problem.
Withdrawal.
That's a good point. But I think we're going on too long. I think we've already solved the mystery. He wasn't murdered. He committed suicide.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true too.
It was suicide.
I think there's a lot of hinky stuff going on with the case, but
well, the Seattle PD did not do their due diligence. They really should have, been a little more. I'm sure they looked into it a bit, and then they went back to that police report. He was locked in the bedroom and suicidal. And then Courtney says, "Oh yeah, he tried to commit suicide in Italy," and so that was probably for them all they needed.
I don't think they even did that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it might not be, but I mean, that's just the way it is, with, those guys have, we all cut corners, right?
True.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, except with the podcast.
Of course.
No, not here. No.
Yeah. But everybody cuts corners, so they were just like, and then there's always this groupthink, and you just sort of get into that whole, everybody thinks it's suicide, I guess it's suicide, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think it was.
I agree.
Yeah.
Everything seems to point that way.
Yeah. It's just, frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's...
Anyway, I've got more theories, but I need to go to the bathroom. So should we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Because our listeners probably have to go to the bathroom too.
Probably.
really,
They're like
they've been holding
circling the block.
Got their legs crossed.
waiting to go to work. You can, if you want to see some of the research we did, we'll post some of those links, not all of them. We might post a couple extra links this week, Steve.
Maybe soaked in bleach and...
No, not
soaked in
those.
bleach?
But you can find that on our website, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can leave comments on this episode if you want. You can also stream us straight from the website. If you so choose. I know we have just a few people who do that. Also on the website, there are links for like merch and donations and stuff like that.
We've updated the merch.
Yeah, we've updated the merch. You can get stickers and stuff now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we sold like 6 of those yesterday, I think.
6 whole stickers, it's true.
Yeah, we made
Yeah. So if you want to buy merch, if you want to do a one-time donation through PayPal, or if you want to become one of our sustaining donors through Patreon, links are on the website for that as well. You are probably listening to us on iTunes. If you are, leave a comment and a rating if you haven't already. That's how people find us, and you make us rise through the ranks like nobody's business.
Yeah, we want that.
Yep. If you have feedback, please, if you want to have a conversation with us, don't do it there because we can't get in contact with you. If you're streaming and you can leave a comment and a rating, do that there as well. You can find us on Facebook. We have the group and the page. Like the page, follow the group. Lots of really good stuff going on there. We have a Twitter, which is Thinkin' Sideways, which is fun most of the time. We also have a subreddit, which is Thinking Sideways, or Thinking Sideways. There's some stuff going on there a little bit. The more that you join, the more that we'll have happening. You can email us if you have suggestions, comments, you want to talk about things, you just want to express your undying love for us.
Yeah, we like those.
Joe loves those a lot.
He really does, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That no, not website. That email address.
It is an email address.
It's an email address. Is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com.
Cool.
I think that's all of them. That having all been said, we're gonna get out of here. We'll talk to you guys next week. So bye.
Ta-ta.
What's that smell?
Oh, my teen spirit. Thinking Sideways is not supported by Netscape Navigator. Instead, it's supported by the generous donations of our listeners on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/thinkingsideways to learn more. And thanks.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a slide.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined as always by
Steve.
and
Devin.
Hey. So, this week we've got to talk about a groovy mystery. This is the mysterious death of Morgan Ingram in December 2011. And by the way, before we go any further, this was suggested by our listener Nicole. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
Fun little mystery. This is actually kind of big on the internet. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not.
Oh, just a little bit.
Yeah.
I've actually, this has been one that's interested me for quite some time, actually, but we've been kind of waiting for the 5-year thing.
Morgan was only 20 years old when she died, but the county coroner initially ruled her death to be from natural causes, which was pulmonary edema caused by acute intermittent porphyria. And if you don't know what that means, I don't know either. Yeah, the reason I didn't really research porphyria, edema by the pulmonary edema is when your lungs fill with fluid.
Or the sacs around your heart do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and but as far as the link between those two, I didn't bother because they revised the cause of death later to suicide by drug overdose.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
porphyria
and so-
is really, really, really rare, too.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, it is. But it does appear that she was being treated for it. So, yeah, so it's a reasonable conclusion. Well, first, a quick introduction to the Ingram family. Morgan Ingram, our victim here, was 20 years old, and she was living with her parents, Steve and Tony Ingram. She had a brother, Ryan, who wasn't living at home at the time. Steve and Tony Ingram also had a grandson whose name was Jared. And the reason I mentioned Jared is he has a little small part in this mystery. The Ingrams lived in a 3-bedroom house on a cul-de-sac called Coral Drive in Carbondale, Colorado.
And Jared was the brother's, Ryan's son,
I
right?
believe so,
Not
yeah.
Morgan's.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean...
Just to clarify.
He was, she was only 20. I mean, my God. So anyway, Carbondale, Colorado, they were kind of out in the sticks. They were not right in the town.
No.
They were out in the country.
Kind of rural estates is what I would call it, or a rural suburb.
Yeah. It actually looks. If you look at the aerial of it, their little cul-de-sac is this little subdivision development out in the middle of nowhere.
And then there's some other houses around it, but everything's really spread out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's fields in the middle of things.
Yeah, I know. It looks like that area. There were Coral Drive is right off Equestrian Avenue, and it looks like there were plans for maybe bigger developments out there. And
That's how they make them usually.
it hasn't really happened yet. I'm sure it will eventually.
Yeah.
Actually, this mystery is pretty thin, and my script originally was only a page and a half long. So I went out to the Carbondale, Colorado Chamber of Commerce webpage, and I cut and pasted everything from there into this script. So
We're
let's
just going to do a
talk about Carbondale.
dramatic reading of Carbondale.
Yeah. Well, first let's start with the new Safeway. Oh, come on! I'm just kidding. Let's back to Morgan. Morgan Ingram's family does not accept the coroner's ruling. They believe that Morgan was murdered. The reason they think so is Morgan was stalked by an unknown person or persons for about 4 months before her death. These incidents began in August 2011, and they continued right up until Morgan's death in December. She died on December 2nd. And they include tapping on her bedroom window, scratching on the window, throwing small rocks at the window, following her in her car at least once, if not twice. And another scary incident. It was early morning, still dark. Morgan had recently gotten a puppy. And by the way, I've seen pictures of the puppy. Super cute puppy.
Very,
So
very
cute.
cute.
Yeah, very cute. The puppy needed to go outside to do a little business. I'm not sure what. And the family was a little on edge because of all the incidents that had taken place. And Morgan's mother, Tony, had suggested that if she needed to let the puppy out after dark, she should stand in the doorway and just let the leash out as far as it could go, and the puppy could do his thing.
And how did she describe it? She said, and then you could just reel the puppy in if something
Yeah.
Yes.
happens.
Yeah. And so on the morning...
Puppy on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the morning of October 27th, it was early, so it was still dark outside. Morgan was standing in the doorway doing that. She glanced to her left, and she saw a man dressed entirely in black standing in their neighbor's yard just past a low fence about 3 feet tall. And needless to say, she did reel the puppy in, probably leaving a trail of urine.
Well,
And-
not probably still. Yeah. I've read the report, and
Yeah.
Tony says that he was still urinating.
Poor puppy. I don't know what that's like being drug along with. Well, I don't want to find out. She got herself inside the house.
And the puppy.
Yeah, and the puppy. Yeah, but it was scary.
That would scare me.
Yeah,
I would imagine, yeah.
Even if I wasn't super on edge, I think if I looked up and saw somebody staring at me in all dark while it was dark out,
in black, you know.
I would. That would scare me.
I don't know. I would just pull out my jammy and open fire.
Yeah, that's because you're a man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Back to the stalking incidents began in early August, and after that, the Ingrams started installing those outdoor lights that had the motion detectors. You know the ones I'm talking about?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And also cameras with like wildlife cameras that have motion detectors. And the lights were going off quite often, which indicates either they had intruders on the property or maybe they had the sensitivity set too high on their motion detectors.
Or they were pointing them at trees, which
were
have
waving in the
branches
wind.
that move.
Yeah, that's possible too.
Yeah, I remember our lights going off a lot. We had once, on the garage one light.
Yeah.
I remember that going off a lot when it was like snowing.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it was raining too hard.
Yeah.
And they were in Colorado, and it was winter
Yeah.
when it was rainy and then for a bit and then snowy.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, there's one thing that's about these things is when you have a neighbor that has one, it's pointed towards your bedroom window.
That's
The worst.
Yeah, well,
That's why I know about the one that we had, because it was pointed kind of indirectly at my bedroom window.
no, I had one of those years ago, and it was coming on all the time when I was trying to go to sleep. And eventually the problem got solved itself. Somebody apparently shot it out with a 22 pellet pistol.
Somebody.
I don't know who, but
Yeah.
somebody took
They
care of the
had
problem.
the lights, and then they also had the cameras.
Yeah, the cameras. And their cameras would occasionally catch a little video of somebody in the driveway or the yard, but the video was never good enough to actually identify anybody. So the cameras weren't doing them a lot of good. And there was another interesting incident happened in daylight. Steve and Tony, that's Steve and Tony Ingram, mom and dad, were talking in the foyer of their house. And Steve had his back to the front door, and Tony was facing the front door. And apparently there were windows on either side of the front door in the house.
Yeah, that's kind of a common design.
Yeah, it is.
Of those
yeah.
prefab houses, yeah.
Yeah. And she saw a person with a white long sleeve shirt go dashing across their driveway through the windows and then turn around and went around the corner and between their house and their neighbor's house to the north. And then she said something to Steve, and Steve ran to the back of the house where they had these sliding glass doors to try to see who it was, or maybe go out and even catch him. And whoever it was gone. So another disturbing incident. And there were all kinds of incidents. I'm not gonna list.
There's
every
too many
single
to
one
go
of them.
through every one of
There's
them.
220 pages worth of them. I'm not exaggerating. You can find it online.
Those are like police reports. So,
Yeah.
the local police. Yeah, the Ingrams kept the local cops kind of busy. They went out there a lot. But there was a pivotal moment on the morning of September 1st, 2011. Morgan was home alone when she heard somebody working the keypad on the front door, and they had electronic locks on both the front and the back doors. And you guys all, I'm sure, know what those are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
you enter the electronic key, the 5 or 6 or 8 digit pin, and it unlocks.
Yeah. Well, when she heard that, she thought it was her mother coming home because her mother had just left to go on a run to the bank, but the buttons kept getting pushed and the door wouldn't open. So Morgan realized it might be the stalker. And now, I don't want to question Morgan's judgment, but to me, this seems like a great time to grab a baseball bat and go answer the front door. Don't you think?
Or even just walk to the front door and look out the window to see who it is.
Well, that might not have been a bad
That,
idea.
yes, this whole baseball thing, no.
Well-
And this may end up being one of those episodes where I have to constantly remind you that as a small woman, that's actually a very bad idea. But I will continue to remind you of that
Yeah.
at
no.
every turn.
I totally see, though. We just talked about the fact that there's windows by the front door.
Yeah, you may as well go look.
Just go look. Oh, okay. Look, it's the neighborhood drunk. He's at the wrong house again.
No, true that.
Or finally, I have a description of what this stalker looks like, because up until now, I've been able to only say it's an unidentified person. I don't know.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons.
Well, but on the other hand, I'm going to do this a lot in this episode again. Fair warning. On the other hand, I can see, I remember being younger, and certainly this is maybe in my earlier teenage years than like in my early 20s, but I can remember being so scared. Sometimes fear just takes hold, and you think, I don't want him to know that I'm in here. I don't want anybody to know that I'm in here. I'm just going to hole up, and maybe they'll just go away. If I just ignore it, it'll just go away, and it won't be a problem, and then it will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that this again. I'm not. Obviously, I wasn't there. As far as I know, Morgan never reported this directly to the police. This came from her mother, Tony.
I think we need to clarify now that almost none of this reporting, at least the initial calls to the police, were done by Tony.
Yeah, they were.
Her mother always was one that if the cops showed up, got the cops there, and then eventually they would talk to her.
It should also be noted that almost all of the contact with the police was neither on the 911 line or the non-emergency line. It was through calling people that Tony had contact with in the police department.
Yes.
It was very rarely a dispatch.
Yeah, but she did call dispatch, but
Every
she also
once in a
communicated a lot via email.
Yeah, she communicated a lot via text, phone call, and email with the police. Yeah, so back to our story here. Whoever that was at the front door, he got away, unseen. When Tony got back, she called the sheriff's department. They sent somebody over. The deputy's name was Chris Yonts. I think that's how it's pronounced. Chris, if you're listening, let me know if I pronounced it right or not. He noticed a footprint in the dirt under a bathroom window. There's 3 bathrooms in that house that have windows.
Of the total 4.
They've got a lot of bathrooms in that house.
It's a big house.
Yeah, it's
2,500 square foot house.
Yeah, it's pretty decent sized, yeah. So there were 3 of them, but I'm not sure which one it was. But there was a footprint. Later that afternoon, the Ingram's grandson, Jared, who I mentioned earlier, and I'm not sure, he was a kid, apparently, I'm not sure exactly how old, 10, 15, 16, I don't know. But he came over to the house, he saw the footprint, and he said that it looked to him like it was the sole of an Etnies shoe. And I don't know how he managed to do that, but
It's not that hard. I mean, some shoes have very distinct...
Well, maybe he had Etnies himself, maybe. Of course, maybe it was his footprint too, I don't know. But Jared was later, not long after that, standing out by the street, and he noticed a neighbor driving by. The neighbor was Keenan Van Ginkel, who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac at 123 Coral Drive.
Kind of.
He kind of lived there.
Yeah.
He lived with his girlfriend.
He had moved in with his girlfriend. He wasn't there. I think he moved in June, maybe, and he was out. He was there for maybe 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, he wasn't there very long.
No, not really. The house was owned by a guy named Jim Harris. His daughter, Brooke Harris, was Keenan's girlfriend. So Jared hustled over to Keenan's house when he was getting out of his car to ask him if he wanted his lawn mowed. But his real motive, he said, was to look at Keenan's shoes. And then why he originally suspected Keenan, I don't know. Maybe he just thought he'd go around and look at everybody in the neighborhood's shoes, until he found some Etnies.
Yeah, I don't know. The family seemed to be convinced. And again, I as you said, I wasn't there, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm casting any negative information on the family, but they seem to be grasping for somebody on their street to be the responsible party.
Well, and I can sort of see that because on the one hand, it'd be inconvenient if you're going to stalk somebody to have to commute out to the sticks where this little subdivision was. So I can see why they might be thinking it's somebody on that little, because there's not a lot of people close by otherwise. But at the same time, what they don't understand about stalkers is that stalkers are willing to go to all kinds of inconvenience to obsessively go after somebody. So I could totally picture somebody driving out there all the time, parking a little ways away and hiking in, and then just doing his thing and then leaving again.
Yeah. That's a very common characteristic, is just taking things to a level that nobody would expect.
Yeah, and so
part of the deal.
Yeah.
On the other hand, these incidences vaguely correspond with when Keenan moved in. And again, since all this information comes from the parents, we don't know if Morgan maybe had some because she had been friends with Keenan's, or at least casual acquaintances with Keenan's girlfriend.
Yeah,
there's no real sense of if the family's trying to kind of protect a past that Morgan said, I had a run-in or two with this guy that made them suspect him more. I don't think that's something that the mom, Tony, would have mentioned, because she does try to, Morgan...
She curates the information.
She really does. She makes sure that everybody knows that Morgan is, perfect.
Yeah.
Which I understand the impetus to do, but we also... I don't think we would know if there had been some past with Keenan to make them think that he was a good candidate for the stalker.
Yeah, I don't.
Just the easy candidate.
Yeah, I don't think that there was any past, actually. But she had known Brooke. They were acquaintances, and that's about it. And they hadn't talked for months, so that's about it. There didn't seem to be any bad blood between them. Okay, anyway, I said this was a pivotal moment because this apparently is what got Keenan on the Ingram's radar. I'm not totally sure about that, but this appears to be it. So Tony called Deputy Yonts later that day and told him that a neighbor had identified Keenan as a suspect. I guess maybe she didn't want to get Jared involved, so she just said, and one of the neighbors said that Keenan would be a likely suspect.
It sounds like the rumor mill was working overtime in this cul-de-sac.
There were a couple of big time gossips in this little cul-de-sac. There really were.
And I feel like that really polluted a lot of what was going on.
Oh yeah, and like her next door neighbor Rhonda in the house to the north. Apparently Tony was busy telling Rhonda about her suspicions. So then Rhonda was spying on Keenan and watching his movements
and telling everybody else.
Yeah.
So there was no secret here.
Yeah. So 2 days later, about 9:30 p.m., Tony is in her office in a bedroom at the front of the house, just right off the front entrance. And Morgan, nobody else was home at the time. Somebody tossed a rock against the window. It must have apparently been a small rock. She keeps talking about rocks. I'm thinking more like pebbles. You know? Yeah. But somebody hit the window with a rock.
The window of the office?
Yeah, the office, which was a bed. It's basically a bedroom. It doubles as an office.
And is that the room that Morgan had been sleeping in?
No.
Okay.
No. She was, according to her mother, I've never heard actually officially from Morgan that she was sleeping in their parents' master bedroom closet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's where she was sleeping. I thought I remembered something about an office, but I could be totally wrong.
Well, there was one incident where she came home and she was taking a shower in her mother's office.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a bathroom in there. It might be, apparently, Morgan did not maintain her own bathroom. It's in her bedroom in tip-top shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yeah, and so maybe the bathtub was just cleaner in her mom's office bathroom, and so she decided to go use that one instead.
Maybe.
Yeah, but she never slept in the office. According to her mother, she slept in the master bedroom closet for a while. Back to the rock throwing incident, Tony calls the sheriff's office. They sent a few deputies over. And by the way, I want to say to any of you in the sheriff's office that are listening, kudos to you guys. You really went out there. You really went out there a lot.
Yeah, you did your job.
Oh, they did. Yeah, they did.
Absolutely. There was no, we'll come over later.
Yeah.
They went and took care of it. Checked it out.
No, I mean there were times when they got a report of an incident. You know, there was one time that they came in from two different directions. You know, they came in from the outside and everything, just in an attempt to catch this mysterious perpetrator.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they searched the house like two doors down, you know, and they searched it more than once actually. The lights were on at 123 Coral Drive, which is where Keenan lives. So the deputies went over there to see if anybody had seen anything. Brooke Harris, Keenan's girlfriend, answered the door. Her dad was not home, but she was asked if she'd seen any suspicious activity. She said she hadn't. She also said Keenan was in the house, but that he was asleep. They asked if she would wake him up, and she didn't want to, because apparently he needed to sleep because he had to get up at and go to work at 2 a.m. So, yeah, he had a job at a grocery store. His shift was generally 2 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Yeah, working at grocery stores can be brutal on you, just because of the hours that are required.
Oh, yeah.
Working that graveyard shift is just tough no matter what.
Yeah.
After the deputies left, the motion-activated lights at the Ingram's house went on at least 7 times that night, which is according to a diary that Tony kept. And she wrote, quote, "We assumed the perp was angry about almost getting caught," unquote.
So I want to point something out or make a comment on something, which is I have looked at the digital versions that she has made of her diaries of the lights on the property, because it's pretty extensive. The locations and times, and the lights would go off. She would have it at 1:30, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the morning.
Didn't she install an app on her phone that tracked every single time the lights went off?
She had comments on them.
Well,
that was the thing that made me think that part of this is she was waking up every time the frickin' light was going on, which means that she wasn't sleeping.
Yeah, which means
I don't think any of them were sleeping very much.
Which really, it has an effect on your perceptions and your judgment.
Yeah, good. Because it does seem like her judgment was not quite right.
No, it's at least questionable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is some questionable judgment here, yeah. Keenan was the family's prime suspect, of course, but their suspicions were amplified when Morgan was followed one night in her car when she was driving home. She slowed down to try to get the car to pass her, but it didn't pass her. And then a third car pulls up behind that car, and in the illumination of the headlights of the third car, Morgan could see the outline of a driver, which appeared to be a male of about Keenan's height and build. And then she turned down Highway 100, which leads to Equestrian Way.
Which is her road home.
Yeah, she turned right on Equestrian Way, and the car went on Highway 100.